In this ACT video, we're going to take a look at solving quadratic equations. We're going to focus on two methods. We're going to solve by factoring, and we're going to solve by the quadratic formula. These are not the only two methods that you can use to solve a quadratic equation. However, these are the most common. In a previous video, we did review factoring quadratic equations, and we'll apply those skills here, and then we'll go over the actual formula for the quadratic formula. And before I get started, I want to review with you standard form of a quadratic equation, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And for both of these methods, we need our equation to be in standard form. So it's equal to 0, and it's in descending order, x squared, x, and then no x at all. All right, so let's take a look at our first example. We've got x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. We're going to solve this quadratic equation by factoring. And you can factor this using any method that you're familiar with. And when you factor a quadratic, it factors into these two binomials. And this one happens to factor as x minus 5 times x minus 1. And negative 5 plus negative 1 is negative 6, our middle number. And negative 5 times negative 1 gives us plus 5, which is the constant. Once you have the quadratic factored, you're going to set each piece equal to 0, or each factor equal to 0. X minus 5 is equal to 0, and x minus 1 is equal to 0. And we simply solve both of these little equations we have here. 5's cancel, and we get x is equal to 5. Second equation, we're going to add 1 to both sides. 1's cancel, and x is equal to 1. So our solution set is 1, 5. Remember, these braces or curly brackets, that's just the notation for a solution set, meaning you have more than one answer. And the ACT is multiple choice, so be on the lookout for questions that ask you to find the product of the solutions or the sum of the solutions. That's pretty common. All right, let's take a look at a second example. 7x squared minus 3x equals 0. We're also going to solve this one by factoring. And it looks a little bit different because it doesn't have the constant there. And that's not a problem. But what I do see is these two terms have an x in common. So we're going to factor out the GCF, x, which is what you always want to look for first when you're factoring. Okay, you still want to go through your steps of factoring. And factor out the x, leaving me with 7x minus 3. X times 7x minus 3 equals 0. Then you set your factors equal to 0, x equals 0, and 7x minus 3 is equal to 0. X is equal to 0 is solved. 7x minus 3, we want to add 3 to both sides. 3's cancel. 7x is equal to 3. Divide by 7 on both sides, and we get x is equal to 3/7. So here our solution set is 0, 3/7. And again, you don't have to write it in the curly brackets or the braces. That is one way to write your solution set. Now, if you get stumped and you forget how to factor, or it's just not working out for you, or maybe the polynomial doesn't factor, then you can use the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula will work every single time. So let's take a look at this example. We've got 2x squared minus 7 equals negative 13x. And we're going to solve this one using the quadratic equation, the quadratic formula, but our quadratic equation needs to be in standard form. So the first thing I see we need to do is take our negative 13x, move it to the left side, and remember when you cross the equal sign, your sign changes. And because that has an x next to it, it belongs in the middle. This gives us 2x squared plus 13x minus 7, equals 0. 2x squared plus 13x minus 7 equals 0. All right, now if you'll recall, your quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. Now, a, b, and c are just numbers, and they come directly from your equation that's in standard form. A is the coefficient of x squared, so a is 2. B is the coefficient of x, so that's 13. And c is the constant, and the sign in front of it goes with it, so that makes c negative 7. All right, now we're ready to plug in. X is equal to the opposite of b, so that would be negative 13 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 13 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 7, all divided by 2a, so 2 times 2. Okay, so everything's plugged in and in the correct spot, and your next step is to simplify the radicand. Now, if you have a calculator where you can type that entire radicand in, just like I have written it with the parentheses and all, then you should go ahead and do that because you want to save yourself some time. Remember, you only have 60 minutes to answer 60 questions. So, moving to the next step, x is equal to negative 13 plus or minus the square root of 13 squared is 169. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times negative 7 gives me plus 56. All divided by 2 times 2, which is 4. All right, I'm still looking at my radicand. Still cleaning this up. So what I need to do next is add the 169 and the 56. And so in my next step, I get x is equal to negative 13 plus or minus the square root of 225, all divided by 4. 225 is a perfect square, so this gives me negative 13 plus or minus 15 over 4. And because 15 is a perfect square, and we can combine it with negative 13, we're going to separate this into two different equations. I'm going to write x is equal to negative 13 plus 15 divided by 4, and x is equal to negative 13 minus 15 divided by 4. Clean those up. X is equal to negative 13 plus 15 is 2 divided by 4, which simplifies to positive 1/2. And x is equal to negative 28 divided by 4, which simplifies to negative 7. So here our solution set is 1/2, comma, negative 7. Let's try one more with the quadratic formula. Looking at this example, we have 3x squared minus 8x equals negative 1. Again, this one is not in standard form. We want it equal to 0. So we need to take this minus 1, move it across the equal sign to the left, and it changes signs, leaving us with 3x squared minus 8x plus 1 equals 0. All right, now we need our A, our B, and our C, which come right from the equation. A is 3, B is negative 8, and C is 1. And the quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. All right, we have our numbers, so we're ready to plug in. This leaves me with x is equal to the opposite of b. Well, b is negative 8, so the opposite of b is positive 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 8 squared, minus 4 times 3 times 1, make my radical sign a little longer, all divided by 2a, so 2 times 3. And again, if you can get your calculator to work for you, you can type this entire quantity in your calculator to get the one number, and that's going to save yourself a lot of time. I've put the parentheses where you'll need to put the parentheses in your calculator. All right, next step. X is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 12, all divided by 6. Still cleaning this up. X is equal to 8 plus or minus the square root of 52 divided by 6. All right, well, 52 is not a perfect square, so let's go to the margin, and we need to simplify the square root of 52. And we can simplify this using the factors the square root of 4 times the square root of 13. That's equivalent to the square root of 52. And we have a video that reviews how to simplify these radicals if you need a little bit more work with it. And square root of 4 is 2. So this leaves us with 2 square roots of 13. So we'll go back over here, giving me x is equal to 8 plus or minus 2 square roots of 13 over 6. All right, we can do one more thing to simplify this. All of these numbers outside the radical, 8, 2, and 6, they all three have a common factor. Now it has to work for all three. And so because 2 goes into all three of them, 2 goes into 8 4 times, 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. This leaves me with x is equal to 4 plus or minus the square root of 13, all divided by 3. You can leave it like that, or you can go put it in the curly brackets or the braces, whatever you want to call it. And that's still your two solutions that you will typically have for a quadratic equation. So you can factor if it will factor, or you can always use the quadratic formula. That will work every single time.